There's a specific kind of silence that happens on your 30th birthday. Not the silence of a quiet room or an empty street. It's the silence that lives inside your chest when the celebration is over, the candles are blown out, the last message has been read, and you're suddenly alone with a number. 30. And somewhere between the cake and the congratulations, a question appears that nobody warned you about. A question that doesn't care about the party or the decorations or the people who love you. A question that just sits there, waiting. Where's the money? Not the money in your wallet. Not the money in your checking account that disappears before the month ends. The real money. The savings. The foundation. The thing that was supposed to be there by now. And for millions of people turning 30 every single year, the honest answer to that question is the same. There is no money. There is no foundation. There is no plan. There is only the sudden, uncomfortable realization that a decade of adult life has passed, and somehow, nobody saved anything real. This is the story of what happens next. Because turning 30 broke doesn't look the way people imagine it does. It doesn't always look like poverty. It doesn't always look like struggle. Sometimes it looks perfectly fine from the outside. A decent apartment. A job with a salary that sounds reasonable when you say it out loud. A phone, a car, subscriptions, nights out, clothes that fit the life you're supposed to be living. The lifestyle is intact. The savings account is not. And the terrifying part is that most people in this situation don't even fully realize it until something forces them to look directly at the numbers. A conversation with a financially aware friend. A random article about retirement projections. A moment of genuine stillness where the noise of daily life goes quiet long enough for the reality to land. You are 30 years old. You have almost nothing saved. And time, which once felt completely infinite, has quietly started moving faster than you expected. The 20s are designed to feel consequence-free. That's not an accident, and it's not entirely your fault. The entire system surrounding young adults communicates the same message in 100 different ways. You're young. You have time. Live your life. Experience things. Don't be so serious. The debt is manageable. The savings can wait. The investment account is something you open later, when things settle down, when the salary gets bigger, when life gets more stable. Except life never really settles down the way people promise it will. The salary gets bigger, but the lifestyle expands to consume it. The expenses that were supposed to be temporary become permanent. The financial decisions that felt small at 23 accumulate into something enormous by 29. And then 30 arrives, and the consequences that felt abstract for an entire decade suddenly become completely real. This is the moment the story begins to change. Not because turning 30 is magic. Not because a number on a calendar transforms a person overnight. But because 30 is often the first age where the gap between where you are and where you thought you would be becomes impossible to ignore. At 25, you can still tell yourself the story. There's time. Things will sort themselves out. Something will change. But at 30, the math starts speaking louder than the story. If you have nothing saved at 30 and you want to retire at 65, you have 35 years. That sounds like a lot until you understand compound interest, inflation, healthcare costs, and the actual price of financial freedom. Then 35. Years starts to feel like exactly enough time if you start immediately, and dangerously short if you keep waiting. The first thing that changes when a person genuinely wakes up financially at 30 is the way they look at the previous decade. Not with guilt, because guilt is rarely productive, but with clarity. And that clarity is often uncomfortable. Because when you actually trace the money that passed through your hands in your 20s, the numbers are staggering. The average person in their 20s earns somewhere between $200,000 and $400,000 over the course of a decade, depending on their career and location. That is a significant amount of money. And for most people who arrive at 30 with nothing saved, that money didn't disappear into some unavoidable catastrophe. It dissolved, gradually, invisibly, through rent that was slightly too expensive, through car payments on vehicles that cost more than they should have, through subscriptions that accumulated quietly in the background, through restaurants and experiences and purchases that felt completely reasonable in the moment and left almost nothing behind. The money was there. The awareness wasn't. This is the part that most financial content gets wrong. It frames this moment as a failure of discipline, a character flaw, a problem of willpower. But that's not what it actually is. What happened in the 20s wasn't a lack of discipline. It was a lack of financial education combined with a culture that actively encouraged spending and passively discouraged saving. Nobody teaches a 22-year-old in their first job how compound interest actually works in their favor if they start immediately, or against them if they start late. Nobody explains lifestyle inflation in concrete terms before it happens. Nobody sits down with a young adult and shows them the actual long-term cost of financing a car they couldn't truly afford, or renting an apartment at the top of their budget instead of the middle. The information exists, but it exists in places that require people to already be looking for it. And most people in their 20s are not looking. They're living. So 30 arrives. And with 30 comes a choice that will define the next decade more completely than any choice in the decade before it. The choice is not complicated, but it is uncomfortable. It is the choice between continuing to perform financial stability while slowly falling further behind, or stopping, looking at the actual numbers, feeling the actual discomfort, and deciding to change the actual behavior. Most people choose the performance, not because they're weak, but because the performance is familiar and the change is genuinely hard. Changing your financial behavior at 30 means confronting habits that have been building for a decade. It means having uncomfortable conversations, making unpopular decisions, and accepting a version of your immediate life that looks less impressive in order to build a version of your future life that is genuinely more free. The ones who choose change don't all start from the same place. Some have debt, some have nothing. Some have a small emergency fund and a vague investment account they set up once and never thought about again. But the starting point matters less than people think. What matters is the decision itself and what follows immediately after it. Because the first practical step of financial transformation at 30 is always the same regardless of the starting point. You have to know exactly where you are, not approximately, not emotionally, exactly. Every dollar of income, every dollar of expense, every dollar of debt, every dollar of savings, every interest rate, every subscription, every financial commitment that money is going toward, including the ones that feel too small to matter, because those are often the ones that matter most when you actually add them up. This process of complete financial honesty is uncomfortable for almost everyone who does it seriously, because the numbers rarely reflect the story people have been telling themselves. People who consider themselves reasonably financially responsible often discover that their monthly expenses exceed their assumptions by hundreds of dollars. People who think their debt is manageable often discover that the interest rates they're paying are quietly making the debt grow faster than their payments can reduce it. People who believe they're saving discover that what they call saving is actually just money that hasn't been spent yet, sitting in an account that earns almost nothing while inflation quietly reduces its real value. The honesty is uncomfortable. It is also completely necessary. What happens after the honesty is different for different people, but the direction is always the same. You start to close the gaps. Not all of them at once, because that's not sustainable, but one at a time, in order of impact. High-interest debt first, because nothing destroys financial progress faster than debt that costs more to carry than savings can earn. Then expenses, not through deprivation but through intentionality. Looking at every recurring cost and asking whether it is genuinely improving your life in proportion to what it costs. Then income, because at 30 there are still significant opportunities to increase what you earn through skills, through positioning, through negotiation, through the kind of professional confidence that comes from knowing exactly where you stand financially and deciding to change it. And finally, investment. The part that feels abstract until the first time you watch money grow without doing anything, and suddenly stops feeling abstract forever. The 30-year-old who wakes up financially and starts investing immediately has a significant advantage that almost nobody talks about. Not because they're starting early in an absolute sense, but because they're starting while compound interest still has enough time to do serious work. A person who begins investing consistently at 30 and continues for 35 years will accumulate significantly more than a person who starts at 40 and invests the same amount for 25 years, even if the monthly contribution is identical. The difference is not dramatic in the first few years, but it becomes dramatic. And understanding that, really understanding it, not just reading the words, but feeling the mathematical weight of it, changes how urgently 30-year-olds treat the decision to start. But the financial transformation that begins at 30 is not only about money. That's the part that surprises people who go through it. Because when you change your relationship with money at 30, you inevitably change your relationship with time. These two things are more connected than most people realize. Money anxiety consumes enormous amounts of mental energy. The background calculation that runs constantly in financially stressed minds. Can I afford this? How much is left? What happens if something goes wrong? When does this get better? Is exhausting in a way that's hard to measure because it never fully stops. When that anxiety begins to reduce, because the numbers are moving in the right direction and the plan is real and the progress is visible, the mental space it frees up is remarkable. People think more clearly. They sleep better. They make better decisions in every area of life, not only the financial ones. There is also something that happens to a person's identity when they go through this kind of financial awakening at 30. Something that is difficult to articulate, but easy to recognize. They stop performing financial confidence and start actually developing it. There's a difference between looking like someone who has their finances together and actually having them together, and that difference lives entirely in the private reality of your numbers. When the private reality starts to align with the public presentation, when the account balance, the investment portfolio, the debt level, and the emergency fund actually reflect the stability that the lifestyle tries to project, something changes internally. A quiet kind of confidence that doesn't need to be announced because it doesn't come from what other people think. It comes from knowing. From the specific knowledge that if something goes wrong, you can handle it. That if an opportunity appears, you have resources to pursue it. That the future, which once felt like a source of anxiety, is slowly becoming something you are actually building toward. The people who make this transition at 30 rarely talk about it as a financial story. They talk about it as a life story. They talk about the moment they stopped feeling behind and started feeling like they were actually moving. They talk about the relationship changes, the conversations that became possible with partners, the anxiety that reduced with family, the decisions they could make without the constant weight of financial fragility in the background. They talk about the work becoming more interesting because they were doing it from a position of growing strength rather than desperate necessity. They talk about options appearing that didn't seem available before, not because their income doubled overnight, but because the way they were managing what they had changed completely. None of this is fast. That's the honest part. Financial transformation at 30 is not a dramatic overnight event. It's a decision followed by months of consistent behavior followed by years of compound results. The first year is the hardest because the results are smallest. The discipline is real and the reward is still mostly invisible. The investment account has a little money in it. The debt is slightly smaller. The emergency fund exists for the first time. None of it feels like freedom yet, but the direction has changed. And direction, at 30, is everything. Because the person who is 30 years old, moving in the right financial direction, with 35 years ahead of them, has more potential than almost any financial content will ever honestly acknowledge. Not because the road is short, because it isn't, but because the road is real, and walking it, consistently, changes everything about where you end up. 30 is not too late. That's not a motivational statement. It's a mathematical one. The math of compound interest, of career growth, of skill development, of relationship building, of genuine wealth creation. None of it requires you to have started at 22. It requires you to start. The people who understand this at 30 and act on it don't spend the rest of their lives catching up. They spend the rest of their lives building. And the thing about building, done consistently over decades, is that it produces results that are almost impossible to imagine from the starting point. Not because something magical happens, because something mathematical does. Small consistent actions, repeated over enough time, create outcomes that feel disproportionate to the effort. That's not inspiration. That's how money actually works. And 30, for the people who finally understand it, is exactly the right moment to let it start working for them.